Welcome. Today I would like to talk about the first game which I played for my club Rache SV since we were relegated to the second league. Actually, we played in the match against another team which was also relegated to the second league, Düsseldorfer SK. And I played with the black pieces against Grandmaster Alexander Berelowitsch. We unfortunately narrowly lost the match and it was very, very close, and I think we could have also won quite easily, but sometimes that's how it goes, and in the end we lost. So Alexander opened with a move e4, to which I replied with e5, and now I didn't go for the Philidor, but I went for knight to c6. And he played the Ruy Lopez, and in the first league I played the move a6 against Navarra. But this time I thought I will go for something else. I wanted to go for the move knight to f6 and trying to go for the Berlin. Well, the Berlin happens after knight takes e4. It's a very solid opening for black, so I thought in the first match, after quite a long break in the league, I would like to play something which is a little bit more strategic and more solid, such that I cannot blunder pieces so easily. Well, I went for knight d6, and we basically reached this position after takes, knight f5, and now queen takes, king takes, and knight to c3. So this is basically the main starting position of the Berlin, and this is the position which Kramnik successfully used to defend many games in his match against Garry Kasparov. And since then, of course, it has been very, very popular and has the tendency to lead to relatively many draws. That said, it's a very, very strategically complex opening, and if you're not 2750, it's not so clear that the game always has to end in a draw. So I highly recommend not to think about the Berlin as something which automatically leads to a draw. Well, black has different plans here. So one plan is to go bishop to d7 and then keeping the king more flexible, sometimes even going to the king side. Or the plan which I played, which is kind of the old move, king to e8. White now goes h3. Intending to go g4, but I block this with h5, because then if he goes g4, it's not so great anymore, because I can take, and then g4 becomes weak. So for instance, probably here even knight h6, and there's immediately some problem on g4. Okay, so what is the general deal with this position? So white's advantage in this position is that he has these 4 pawns against 3 on the king side, whereas the black's majority, this includes a double pawn, so it's not very easy to make a passed pawn on the queen side. Black has 2 bishops, but this is not really such a big advantage, because in most lines, white is able to exchange at least one of these bishops. What is a trump in favor of black is this king on e8, which is usually more active than the king on g1. Yeah, so it's strategically very, very subtle, and my opponent also chose not to go for a theoretical battle with the main moves here. So the main moves are bishop to f4 and bishop to g5, and then there is a lot of theory, but after some thinking he went for a different move, namely for the move b3. So there are plenty of other moves possible, but okay, b3 is just, I think, intended to get us both out of book, and I think at this point none of us had any theoretical knowledge anymore, so it's really a bit of a freestyle game from here. I vaguely remembered that sometimes after b3 you can go bishop b4, and that's what I did in the game, but I think it's not very precise. I think what I should have done is to start with the move a5, and now only after bishop to b2, now go for bishop b4. And there were a few games in this line, because now if white removes the knight, there is always a4. Yeah, so that might be a difference. And instead, if I go bishop b4 immediately, he can just remove the knight to e4, and now this bishop on b4 looks a little bit strange. I mean, of course, nothing too serious has happened so far. Okay, bishop e6, normal developing move. And here my opponent made a small mistake, I would say. Namely, he played the move bishop to d2. Instead, probably just continuing development with rook d1 and keeping the options flexible for the bishop was to be preferred. Yeah, because I cannot really go king e7 in these positions. This always runs into c3 followed by bishop a3, for instance. So that's not a really good option. So after rook d1, one option would be to reroute the bishop to e7, but then in comparison to the game, so for instance, rook d1, bishop e7, in comparison to the game, he would be one tempo up. Yeah, instead he went for bishop d2. And here I didn't seize my chance to grab the initiative, so I should have just taken on d2. And I think this is a lack of understanding of the opening from my part, because after this exchange, now basically black has a very, very free play, has a very good king, has a very strong knight on f5, and will come with something like either rook d8 and a5, or maybe even rook a to d8 and h4. And this position is definitely decent for black, maybe even slightly better for black. Yeah, so bishop d5 is also coming. And white's king is still on g1, so in most endgames it's slightly easier to play for black. Yeah, instead I went back to e7 because I remembered that the main line looks a little bit like this sometimes, with a bishop on e7, bishop on f4. Yeah, and he indeed went for this bishop to g5, maybe also not the most precise. And I now went for a5. Yeah? So the idea of a4 is that then I can build up some pressure on the a file, and if he goes a4 himself, he slightly weakens the structure here. So that's also a very subtle point, but we will see why this is relevant in the game. I went with a thematical rook to d8. Usually exchanging one pair of rooks, at least it's something that black wants. Rook d1. Yeah, and here I started thinking for quite some time, and I was absolutely not sure which of the main options I have is the best one. So one option that I thought about for quite a bit of time is to go h4. The point of h4 is just to prevent g3. So the plan that white has in this position, sometimes if I don't do anything, is to go g3, king g2, and then g4. And then to just exchange pawns here, at some point go f4, f5, and try to build a majority on the king side. So h4 would have been one option. Let's give one sample line. Let's say takes, 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 and yeah, I wasn't sure how to evaluate this, and I think something like knight g5, maybe either king e7 immediately, or maybe even bishop d5, and then after c4 just something like this, takes, takes, which should be around equal and which is also very close to the position we got in the game. Instead, after rook a1, the computer gives this move, which I did not really consider, takes, takes, and just bishop to d5. And says that here, let's say after takes, takes, knight g5, after rook d8, black is slightly better. Because even in the knight endgames after c4 and takes, even there, the more active king plays a certain role, and also the fact that these pawns are slightly vulnerable. So probably that would have been the best, to just exchange on d1. Instead, I went for maybe the normal looking move, bishop takes g5. Takes, and now king e7. The upside, I thought, is that I keep the tension on the d file, so that in some cases I can go for this. That's another big plus. And c5 is always very awkward for him to defend, because he doesn't really want to play c4 and give up this d4 square. That's what we will see in the game. Okay, so anyway, he took. Again, a big strategic decision, whether to take back with a king or with a pawn. And I took back with a pawn. I think it feels slightly more natural, but taking with the king is definitely also fine. And I had a very concrete idea. So, yeah. The downside of not playing h4 before is now that we see the plan that white has, namely g3. And here I think I played a very strong maneuver. Went for rook to d5. If he takes, of course, then I get rid of this double pawn, and in this case black is clearly better, I would say. Yeah, because then I have this 4 against 3 on the queen side. We'll go for some plan like this and push. So he can't really take. If he doesn't take, I will go for rook hd8. Then he either has to take or he has to give me the d-file. So he didn't want either of that. He went for the move c4. But of course c4 is very committal. So c4 weakens the square d4 quite a bit. And I now just went back to d8. And I thought, okay, c4 is weakening, and now I will just go for this plan, going c5, and then always having this jumps knight to d4 at any point. And I thought here actually I would be better, but objectively I think it's close to equal. He went for the normal king to g2, and I went for the aforementioned c5. And here it's not so easy to suggest a move for white. You don't really want to go g4 immediately. I mean, you can do that. Would lead to slightly somewhat similar position to what we get in the game. My opponent first went for this, activating the rook a little bit. And I also played a normal waiting move, rook to f8. And finally he decided, okay, now it's time to take the rooks. Take, and go for g4. Attacking my strong knight. And yeah, of course, if I had the pawn on h4 beforehand, this would not have been possible. So takes, and knight to d4. And at this point, I was very, very surprised by his move. He played the move rook to e3. I was almost sure he was going to take. And yeah, I thought cd, I don't really know what my next moves would be. So I thought probably just rook takes. And then maybe something like king g3 and check, takes, and g5 with a draw. Nobody can break through anymore. Instead, he went for the move rook to e3. I think he still wanted to play for a win here. And yeah, I was again very, very surprised because I thought, okay, I have knight to c2, and now potentially this is coming. So I thought again I might be better here, but it turns out he has this very tricky move rook to e4. And this is a move which I had not anticipated at all, and where first I thought, okay, this can't be, but actually the computer also doesn't give a clear way to advantage for black here. So I think it was actually quite a nice move. So what is the main point? I thought, okay, if I go rook to d3, he has this very nasty rook f4 thing. I take, and now he just goes for knight g5, intending rook f7 check. And I'm extremely slow on the queen side. So this is the downside of this pawn structure that I have now. I'm extremely slow. It takes me like ages until I can get a pawn promoted, and he's quite quick. So, and yeah, when I calculated this position, this looked way, way, way too scary for me to play it. Computer is not super impressed, but also says that this position might be slightly better for white. But it looked extremely scary for me, so I didn't go for that. Computer also gives one other option, rook to d1, with the idea of maybe meeting rook f4 with some check here and trading down pieces. And then, yeah, something quite artificial like this, where again I could either exchange rooks, or computer even goes for this artificial move, but still says the position is equal, so I don't really see the big deal of this plan. Okay, so after rook e4, instead I thought, okay, why don't I just go back to d4? And that's what I did in the game. If he takes, I mean, I can just probably take back either way, and that would be fine. So after knight d4, he decided to go back to e3. I went back here. Yeah, and now he tried this. But again, I can just go back. And he went rook e3 back. And I hinted at the fact that I will play the move knight to c2 with a threefold repetition of the position and claimed a draw. Before doing that, I was actually quite tempted to play a rook to d3. Because if he exchanges, then I mean I can at least take this pawn in some lines. I thought even this is probably around equal, but he could also just go for king g3, and then the point is probably he's not really risking anything. and he might even have these maneuvers when suddenly white might be better. So I think it's understandable that I didn't go for that, but instead went for the move knight to c2 with a threefold repetition of the position. Well, this was the first game of the season in Germany, and I'm decently happy with the draw. I think I missed a few opportunities in the early middle game. He also maybe missed a few opportunities in the early middle game, and afterwards it was quite a decent game where both sides carried out the logical plans. He remained very calm, so I think he did quite well after the c5, when I thought it would be already a little bit better for black, but I think he thought it would be better for white, so it was quite interesting to see that in the analysis. And objectively, it was probably just equal. Well, that's it for the first game of the second league, and see you next time.